Okay, on sibling relationships, think about this. How often do you think siblings get into a conflict? So think about that. How often do siblings get into a conflict? How often? According to the research, there's a conflict between siblings on average every 10 minutes. So it's probably a lot more than you expected. So it's going to be on average throughout the day, every 10 minutes. What do you think is the most common way for a parent to deal with sibling conflict? So the most common way that parents deal with sibling conflicts, what do you think it is? According to the researchers, it is to do absolutely nothing. These conflicts are happening so often that a lot of parents are just like, forget it, I'm not even going to deal with this. Go deal with it yourself. I don't want to hear any more about it, is basically the parent's position. What the researchers say, though, is that you should get involved and that this can provide an avenue for positive social interaction. Basically, they can learn how to have conflict and how to work things out. And so as a parent, what you'd like to do is kind of get oversee it and try to help them to develop those skills. In some past classes, some students have discussed some very interesting ways that their parents handled sibling conflict. And if you would like to discuss that in the discussions, I'm sure we would all appreciate hearing those stories. On favorites for parents, do you think children, first of all, do you think parents have favorite children? So you might think about that. Do they have favorites? They do. 65% of mothers and 70% of dads showed favoritism. So it's a substantial amount. It's probably maybe even more than that. The one reason to actually be talking about this in a serious way is that the ones that are not picked as the favorites, that can actually lead to issues later on. It can lead to a lower self-esteem and maybe even a little bit of sadness that they're not the favorite and that this other sibling, for whatever reason, is the preferred one. So something to think about. On birth order, you've probably heard about this kind of stuff before, that the first is the most intelligent, they're most achieving, they're the most conscientious, and the later kids are more rebellious, maybe more agreeable. The middle ones are maybe. Some research shows the birth order can affect things. Some research not really. I think what the consensus seems to be is that yes, there are differences, but the differences are very small, and that the birth order actually has a limited ability to predict behavior. So yeah, some research supports it, some not so much. If you have some ideas on this, some citations, please talk about it in the discussions. Briefly, also related to family stuff, on divorce. Children in divorced families, so about 40% of kids now in the U.S. will experience a parent's divorce. And in almost all areas, according to the textbook, children from intact, never divorced families are better adjusted. As an example, kids that experienced a divorce were more likely, on average, to experience a lifetime suicide attempt. That's pretty serious. All that being said, though, in my opinion, even if the parents had stayed together, it's not like those children's lives were going to turn out great, because they weren't going to have great homes. They were going to have two parents that didn't like being with each other. So I'm not exactly sure how useful this info is. Maybe something better to look at would be how well the parents are matched, better than if they're divorced. How do they get along? Not necessarily whether or not they're divorced, because some parents stay married for the kids, and it doesn't turn out that great. Feel free to discuss that in discussions if you'd like. Also related to this, the idea of high versus low SES parents. We've talked about this numerous times. Low SES, they have less access to resources compared to higher income families. Consequently, they're also going to have less time. So parents from low SES backgrounds are more directive and less conversational with their children. And we actually talked about this in an earlier chapter. They don't want to talk through things because they don't have time for it. Just do what I told you to do. So related to this, low SES parents are more likely to take an authoritarian parenting style compared to the other styles. On the other hand, parents from high SES backgrounds are more likely to create a home atmosphere where the kids are like equal participants instead of lower tier family members. On those parenting styles, low SES more likely to be authoritarian, high SES more likely to be authoritative. And one of the reasons is that high SES parents are going to have more time so they can actually explain things to their kids. All right, that's it for the stuff on family in this chapter. On the next slide, we'll discuss a little bit on peer relations, play, and media.